I'll be honest with you. When I first saw Moonlight Peaks, I thought it was just another farming sim with a vampire skin. Cute, but nothing out of this world. But after spending countless nights in this town, I realized this game has a lot more depth than it seems. The supernatural theme isn't just decoration. The nightly routine, vampire abilities, and that potion system end up completely changing how you manage the farm. Today, I'm going to give you 10 advanced tips that took me hours to discover on my own, and that definitely changed the way I play. No basic theory, just what actually works in practice. I'm Mary, and let's get into the video. Man, let me tell you something that changed my life in Moonlight Peaks. In the beginning, I stayed in that vampire form, running from one side to the other, tilling soil, digging, and before the middle of the night, my energy was already gone. I thought it was just a matter of eating more, resting, and accepting that the game is slow. But then, almost by accident, I discovered that you can transform into that little Hellcat, the Hellkitten, and absolutely everything changed. Look, I know it sounds silly. You see a cute black cat and think it's just visual, but it's not. When you are in Hellkitten form and go to till the soil, the energy cost is much lower. I haven't done the exact math, but in practice, I can till almost twice as much land before needing to catch my breath. And digging soil, same thing. Stamina drops much slower, and that means you work more and rest less. And there's another thing. The Moonlight Peaks map is big, like inconveniently big when you're on foot. In vampire form, I felt like half the night was wasted just moving around. As a Hellkitten, you get a speed bonus that makes crossing these distances almost instantaneous. That feeling of arriving at a location, doing what you need to do, and coming back with plenty of time left to plant even more, it's a whole different game. If you're not using this form all the time yet, start today. It's not just a visual trick, it's an essential optimization tool. It saves energy, saves time, and makes your night much more productive. Forget the regular axe and pickaxe. As soon as you unlock the Ethereal axes and Ethereal Pickaxes spells, use them without mercy. They summon ghostly tools that literally do all the heavy lifting of chopping wood and mining stone for you, while your vampire simply walks nearby. I know you get the urge to hit every stone and tree that pops up in front of you, especially when you're starting out and want to progress quickly, but that's a mistake practically every player makes in their first few hours, and I fell into that trap myself before discovering these spells. The problem is that every manual swing consumes a good chunk of your stamina, and in a game where you need it to tend to the farm, brew potions, and still socialize with werewolves and witches around town, wasting energy on mining is simply playing against yourself. What makes this mechanic so smart is precisely the game's supernatural touch. It makes total sense for a vampire to use magic to avoid unnecessary physical effort, and that's exactly what Ethereal axes and Ethereal pickaxes represent, a way to leverage your powers instead of wasting energy for nothing. While the ghostly tools take care of chopping and mining automatically, you are free to focus on exploring the map, gathering other resources, or simply enjoying the cozy and slightly haunted atmosphere of the town. In the end, this is one of those tips that look small on paper, but make an absurd difference in practice. Saving stamina means more productive days, less time resting to recover energy, and much more progress in your eternal life in Moonlight Peaks. If you haven't unlocked these spells yet, prioritize it as soon as possible, because once you experience walking around the map, watching phantom axes and pickaxes working on their own, it's impossible to go back to doing it the manual way. If I had to pick one tip that truly changes the pacing, it would be this: increasing the duration of the night. In a vampire game, time isn't just a system detail, it's practically part of the identity of the experience. So getting more minutes of exploration makes a massive difference. The trick here is quite interesting because it rewards players who explore carefully. By gathering 11 soul blobs, you get death to deliver the antique clock to your doorstep, and that already gives you that delightful feeling of hidden progress that I love in simulation games. It's not just leveling up a stat, it's almost as if the game says, okay, you've proven you deserve more time in the dark. After that, the payoff becomes even more valuable because you adjust the night duration in the settings and can stretch this period to 25 minutes. This is great for anyone who feels the clock ticking down too fast between planting, mining, foraging, and still rushing back to the coffin before dawn. For me, this kind of option transforms the game's routine because it makes the experience less rushed and more enjoyable to manage. This is a perfect tip for vampires tight on time, as it solves one of the game's biggest limits without breaking immersion. I like when a system like this exists because it makes it clear that Moonlight Peaks doesn't just want to rush you, but also give you tools to adapt the pace to your playstyle. And honestly, for a vampire, having more night available feels less like a comfort and more like a right. This tip for me is one of the most important. In the beginning, I also fell into the trap of selling everything raw, thinking I was making quick cash. But in practice, the return is just too weak. When you realize the game gives you options to turn ingredients into processed goods, everything changes. What I like most here is how well it aligns with the game's logic. You're not just planting for the sake of planting, you're building a smarter routine. Kegs, furnaces, and jam makers make your production much more valuable, and that makes each harvest yield way more than I initially imagined. For me, the absolute priority early in the game would definitely be the kegs. They're usually the best starting point because they help turn what seemed like small profits into real money. And when you start fitting in the other processors too, the farm finally starts to look like a real business, not just a pretty-looking vegetable garden. Don't waste good items by selling them raw. In Moonlight Peaks, the real gain comes from processing, and the sooner you understand this, the faster your economy goes from weak to absurd. One of the most charming things about Moonlight Peaks is precisely how it transforms even the sales system into something with personality, and Chester is a great example of that. Instead of using a regular mailbox, the game places a living, three-eyed chest right in front of you that immediately steals the show. And I think that's perfect for the bizarre and cozy vibe it wants to deliver. The coolest part is that Chester isn't just a funny idea, he becomes part of the farm's routine. You put everything you want to sell into his inventory, give him a pet, and let the little monster handle your daily profits. This gives a much more alive feeling to a mechanic that, in other games, is usually just throwing an item into a box and that's it. I really like this kind of detail because it shows the game doesn't just want to be functional, it wants to have a soul. Even selling items gets a touch of strange fantasy, almost as if the farm had its own cursed yet friendly mascot. And honestly, that makes a difference. When the main selling system is memorable on its own, the game starts to stick in the player's mind in a much stronger way. Chester is exactly the kind of character that helps Moonlight Peaks stand out. He turns a repetitive task into something that fits the world, tone, and identity of the game. And I'd even say the most fun detail here isn't selling the items, but remembering that the official salesman of your farm is a monstrous chest that only works properly if you treat it with affection. In the first 30 days of Moonlight Peaks, I treat stamina as the most important resource in the game because it's what sustains the pace of my entire night. And this becomes even more evident when raw ingredients barely recover any energy, so I don't waste time trying to live off them alone. What I do is build up a stock of grape juice early on and start consuming processed items whenever I need to keep the routine moving. The game makes it very clear that juices and jams are much more efficient for recovery delivering energy and mana, so I prefer to invest in that instead of dragging myself around after just a few tasks. In practice, this completely changes how I organize my days. Instead of wasting my actions eating whatever just to survive, I think about production, reserves, and consistency. That way, I can keep mining, tending to the farm, and exploring without feeling like the energy bar is constantly holding me back. And for me, this is one of the most important early game tips, because the first 30 days are precisely the phase where the game demands the most planning. If I don't take this stamina management seriously from the start, progression becomes way too slow. So I always keep grape juice and other processed goods ready, because that keeps my vampire running at the best possible pace. Building multiple kegs right at the start is one of the smartest decisions in Moonlight Peaks. When I keep at least 3 kegs running all the time, the game starts working in my favor because I transform simple resources into much more valuable products without having to put in manual effort all day long. What I like most about the strategy is that it creates a constant stream of profit. While the kegs are producing wine, juices, and other processed items, I can focus on other parts of the farm without feeling like I'm leaving money on the table. This gives you that great feeling that the foundation is growing on its own, but in a planned way. I also find it very strong because this is exactly the phase where the game starts asking for more structure. At the beginning, selling raw goods only works for a short while, but in the mid-game, the difference between improvising and having processed production becomes massive. Kegs running all the time basically become an income machine, and that relieves a lot of pressure from the rest of the routine. This is one of those tips that I consider a real priority, not just a good idea. If I want to reach the mid-game comfortably, I invest early in kegs because they deliver gold with little effort and make my progression much more stable. In Moonlight Peaks, efficiency counts a lot, and few systems are as consistent as keeping 3 or more kegs always busy. This is one of the first things I prioritize, capturing all soul blobs. As soon as I unlock the net with death, I start catching these 100 flying souls because I know the reward is well worth the effort. The best part of this goal is that it grants me access to the antique clock, and that completely changes my game pace. I use this clock to increase the night duration in the settings, because in my case, more time in the dark means more exploration, more foraging, and less rushing to run back to the coffin. I don't see this as a side task, but rather as part of the core strategy of my playthrough. Every soul blob I catch brings me closer to an advantage that actually makes a difference, so I keep gathering them consistently until I unlock the reward. In a vampire game, time is a resource, and here I make sure to expand that resource as much as possible. It's highly worth prioritizing soul blobs early. When I manage to extend the night to 25 minutes or more, the whole experience becomes more comfortable and productive. For me, this is the kind of breakthrough that transforms Moonlight Peaks from a tight game into a much more controlled routine. Chasing down all spells as early as possible at the Webb of Wonders is a priority, simply because spells like Aquaflux completely change how I handle the farm, given that I stop wasting energy on basic tasks and start playing in a much more efficient way. Aquaflux, for example, is exactly the kind of magic that is worth its weight in gold early on. Instead of watering everything manually and draining my stamina for nothing, I let the spell take over that work and save my energy for what really matters that day. For me, this lets the game breathe better, making the routine less tedious and more strategic. But I don't ignore mana either, because it becomes the new resource that needs to be carefully managed. I replenish mana with food and machines like the mana extractor, because I know that the better I manage this reserve, the longer I can keep my spells active without stalling my progress. It's the kind of system that seems simple, but drastically changes my farm's efficiency. When I grab spells early, I free up my stamina for mining, foraging, exploring, and everything else the Moonlight Peak's night demands. Instead of wearing myself out with automated tasks, I use magic to lighten my routine and make my progress much faster. The game heavily rewards anyone who organizes storage early and doesn't leave good resources sitting idle, so I always view the house as my main warehouse from day one. What I do is set up plenty of storage right at the start and get used to storing everything intentionally. Instead of cluttering my inventory with raw materials and running out of space for what actually matters, I separate the resources and leave the base ready to grow. This prevents that messy feeling that usually halts progress in the first few days. Next, I prioritize processing everything possible using the refiner, furnace, and kegs. Wood, stone, ores, and crops become much more valuable when they undergo this kind of transformation, and that's when profits truly start to climb. For me, the game becomes much more satisfying when every raw item becomes part of a production chain instead of just being another pile of accumulated material. In this game, efficiency comes before quantity. If you organize your storage early and start processing everything as soon as possible, your farm gains momentum, profits grow, and you feel like you're always one step ahead. And honestly, in a vampire life with so much to do, I much prefer working smart over constantly putting out fires caused by a full inventory.
I left that place in summer, swore I'd be back by